Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. The U.S.-Israeli war with Iran has now entered its third day, and President Donald Trump says it could last weeks. The U.S. leader also acknowledged that he had not ruled out sending ground forces into Iran. Iran says it will attack any vessel trying to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical oil transit routes. It also launched drone attacks on energy facilities in Qatar and Saudi Arabia, both key U.S. allies in the Gulf. President Lee Jae-myung, who's on a state visit to Singapore, attended a summit on artificial intelligence and called for deeper cooperation in AI. He said South Korea will establish a $300 million global fund in Singapore by 2030, focused on investing in promising AI and deep tech startups from both countries. We begin this morning with the U.S.-Israeli war with Iran. It's now been 3 days since the attack on Iran was launched, and U.S. President Donald Trump now says the war could last 4 to 5 weeks and refused to rule out deploying U.S. ground troops to Iran. Our Kim Do-yeon starts us off.
3 days into the Operation Epic Fury, the joint U.S. and Israeli attack on Iran, U.S. President Donald Trump justified the assault. Speaking to the press at the White House on Monday local time, Trump said the decision was made to thwart Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs and to eliminate its naval assets. Trump also vowed to pursue the war for as long as necessary.
This was our last best chance to strike what we're doing right now and eliminate the intolerable threats posed by this sick and sinister regime. And they are indeed sick and sinister.
The attacks have killed Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, sunk Iranian warships, and hit more than 1,000 targets so far. Trump added that the operation could last to 4 to 5 weeks, possibly longer, and could even include the deployment of ground forces.
But whatever the time is, it's okay. Whatever it takes, we will always, and we have right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks. But we have capability to go far longer than that.
Trump's Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth insisted that the operation was not the beginning of an endless war, while the Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that while the president has the option of doing so, the U.S. military is not currently postured to deploy ground forces. In terms of casualties, at least 550 people in Iran have been killed, according to Iranian Red Crescent, while 6 U.S. service members were also killed over the past 3 days, according to the U.S. military. And in the U.S., the public has expressed its dissatisfaction with the operation. Nearly 6 in 10 Americans disapprove of military action against Iran, as most believe a long-term military conflict between the two nations is likely, according to a new CNN poll conducted by SSRS. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And Iran has declared the Strait of Hormuz closed and threatened to attack any vessel that attempts to pass through the key oil choke point. The move has sent energy prices sharply higher and raised fears of major disruptions to global oil and gas supplies. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has declared the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz closed to all vessels. According to Iranian state media on Monday, a senior advisor to the Guard's commander-in-chief said the strait is shut and that any vessels trying to transit it would be attacked by the Revolutionary Guards or Iran's regular navy. If enforced, the move would effectively halt commercial shipping at one of the world's most critical energy choke points. The Strait of Hormuz is the narrow entrance to the Persian Gulf, through which about 1/5 of global oil exports passes. Tankers using the route transport oil and gas from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, Qatar, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, and Iran, with much of it destined for Asian markets. Meanwhile, tensions escalated further on Monday as Iran launched drone attacks on energy installations in Qatar and Saudi Arabia, both key U.S. allies in the Gulf. Qatar's defense ministry said Iranian drones targeted a power plant and an energy facility. Shortly afterward, Qatar Energy, announced it would halt production, a move that sent global natural gas prices sharply higher. Oil prices also continued to climb amid fears of supply disruptions and potential shipping bottlenecks. Brent crude futures for May delivery rose 6.7% to $77.74 per barrel, while West Texas Intermediate gained 6.3% to $71.23. Despite the surge, some analysts noted that the increase was smaller than expected, as earlier projections had warned that oil could approach $100 per barrel. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And tensions in the Middle East are now sparking concerns over potential energy disruptions and the impact on South Korea's economy. Officials say contingency plans are in place and that they're moving swiftly to respond. Our Kim Jun-ho has more.
Warnings from Iran telling vessels not to enter the Strait of Hormuz have raised concerns for import-dependent economies. South Korea relies on the Middle East for over 70% of its crude oil and around 20% of its LNG, making it particularly vulnerable to any disruption. The closure would force tankers to take alternate, longer routes, raising shipping costs and causing delivery delays, while experts warn oil prices could climb as high as $100 a barrel. That would drive up costs for key industries in South Korea, while adding to inflationary pressure and weighing on exports tied to the Middle East. In response, the government has stepped up emergency checks as tensions in the Middle East escalate. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Resources held an interagency meeting Monday, warning that global oil and gas prices could remain volatile, but stressed the country is prepared for a prolonged crisis.
We have stockpiles covering 208 days of crude oil and refined products, and we are confident that supply can be maintained even if the situation becomes prolonged.
The presidential office also moved to calm public concerns. Speaking to reporters during a visit to Singapore, top security advisor Ri Song-nak said there was no need for undue alarm.
We are thoroughly prepared across all areas, including the real economy, financial markets, and national security. And the presidential office is maintaining an emergency response mode.
He added that the situation remains in its early stages and that the government will keep a close watch while preparing measures for a range of possible outcomes. Kim Jun-ho, Arirang News.
South Korea's foreign ministry has issued a temporary special travel advisory for 7 Middle Eastern countries, including the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. The advisory went into effect as of Monday at 6 p.m., with the ministry urging citizens planning to visit the region to cancel or postpone their trips, and advising those already there to move to safer locations. Oman, Bahrain, Jordan, and Kuwait are also included in the advisory. Under the measure, areas currently under Level 1 and Level 2 advisories will be raised to a special Level 2.5 alert, while Level 3 zones will remain unchanged. A special travel advisory can last up to 90 days and is issued in response to urgent short-term risks. And now for a closer look at the conflict between the U.S. and Iran and how it's expanding across the region. We're joined today by Dr. Lee Ji-soo, visiting researcher at the Institute of Middle East Studies. Dr. Lee, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So, Iran's supreme leader has been killed in a strike by the U.S. and Israel. What does this death mean for the country, and what are the diplomatic and economic motives behind the U.S. attack?
Iranian supreme leader is not just a political figure. He is seen as God's representative on earth, the highest religious authority, and the most powerful decision maker in the country. So in many ways, he embodies the very foundation of the Islamic Republic established in 1979. He is the symbolic and ideological guardian of the Islamic Revolution itself. That's why Khamenei's death is far more than the passing of a national leader. Because of his age, there had long been quiet discussions about what Iran might look like after him, but the fact that he was killed suddenly in the U.S. strike changes the equation entirely. It raises serious questions not only about succession, but about the stability and future direction of Iran's entire theocratic system. The Trump administration has argued that it detected signs of an imminent Iranian missile attack and decided to act first. Their position is that waiting to absorb the strike could have resulted in significant casualties among U.S. forces and its allies. So, from Washington's perspective, this was framed as a defensive preemptive move, striking first to prevent greater damage later. At the same time, this military operation likely reflects growing frustration in Washington. Nuclear negotiations with Iran had resumed after an 8-month pause, but there was very little meaningful progress. Some analysts see this strike as a clear demonstration of President Trump's second-term doctrine of peace through strength, the idea that diplomacy is only effective when backed by credible military power. So there is also an energy dimension to consider. The Trump administration has been focused on strengthening America's leverage in global energy markets. By taking this step, Washington may gain indirect influence over Iranian oil exports in the future.
Right, so what's next for Iran's leadership? How does Iran choose its supreme leader? And who are some of the potential contenders to replace Khamenei?
Until a new supreme leader is formally selected, Iran will be governed by a 3-member leadership council. That body reportedly includes President Masoud Pezeshkian, Judiciary Chef Gholam Hossein Mohseni Ejei, and Ayatollah Ali Reza Arafi, a member of the Guardian Council. Some Western media are suggesting that one of these 3 figures could eventually be selected as the next supreme leader. Also, other names are being discussed. Ali Larizani, currently serving as a secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, is also being mentioned as a possible successor. He is reportedly someone Khamenei trusted with broad authority during times of crisis. Another frequently mentioned figure is Mustafa Khamenei, the supreme leader's second son, who is believed to enjoy backing from the elements of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Under Iran's constitution, the supreme leader is chosen by the Assembly of Experts, a body made up of 88 senior clerics. They elect the leader through a secret ballot, and the candidate must secure a majority vote of those present. The person selected has to be a cleric with strong expertise in Islamic law or Sharia, as well as demonstrated political and administrative judgment. However, it is also possible that the current theocratic framework itself could face deeper structure change. If the system weakens significantly, an alternative leadership model could emerge. Actually, President Trump appears to be factoring in that possibility, openly encouraging the Iranian public to push for political change. In that context, Reza Pahlavi, the exiled crown prince of the former Iranian monarchy, has stated that he will be willing to return to Iran and help lead the transitional government. That said, there is still no clear or unified alternative on the table. So at this point, multiple scenarios remain possible, and the direction Iran ultimately takes is far from settled.
I see, and Iran has warned it'll attack any ship trying to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. What does this tell us about Iran's next steps, and how might this affect countries around the world?
Yeah, as you said, tensions are rising around the Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly 20% of the world's oil supply passes. Any instability there immediately raises global energy concerns. The current Iranian leadership has made it clear that it does not intend to negotiate with the United States. Instead, it has responded with missile and drone attacks targeting U.S. military bases in the region, as well as American allies. In particular, Iran has been using large numbers of the Shahed 136, which is described as a suicide drone. The key point here is cost asymmetry. The Shahed 136 is relatively inexpensive to produce, but intercepting it requires sophisticated and costly air defense missiles. In that sense, Iran appears to be pursuing a strategy aimed at exhausting the air defense systems of U.S. bases and regional partners. It signals that Tehran is not prepared to back down easily, and Iran's regional proxies, including Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and pro-Iranian Shiite militias in Iraq, have also stepped up attacks against U.S. forces and allied interests. But Iran itself was significantly weakened by joint U.S.-Israeli strikes last year, and the same is true for the elements of the so-called axis of resistance. So, while the rhetoric is strong and the tactics are disruptive, it remains uncertain how much sustained or strategic damage Iran and its partners can realistically inflict on the United States or Israel at this stage.
Right, and after the U.S. attack, Iran's retaliatory strikes are now affecting nearby areas, and that includes Dubai and Qatar. Could it lead to a wider war? And how do you think the security situation in the Middle East region will play out?
Yeah, as we've seen over the past few days, Iran is not only targeting Israel and U.S. military bases, but also pro-American Gulf countries such as Qatar, the UAE, Bahrain, and even Saudi Arabia. Qatar hosts the largest U.S. military base in the Gulf, and the others are close U.S. partners in the region. For Tehran to carry out large-scale strikes directly against neighboring Gulf states is highly unusual, and the damage hasn't been confined to military sites. Even civilian infrastructures such as hotels has also been caught up in the attacks. So at the moment, major Gulf airports, including those in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Doha, have faced significant disruptions, with flights grounded amid security concerns. The UAE reacted swiftly, announcing it would close its embassy in Iran, and GCC foreign ministers gathered for an emergency meeting, cautioning that if the attacks don't stop, military actions against Iran cannot be ruled out. So far, none of the Gulf states has carried out actual direct military retaliation against Iran, but tensions remain extremely high. So, given the pace of escalation, the situation remains fluid, and the coming days will be critical in determining whether this crisis stabilizes or widens further.
I see. I guess we'll have to see how the situation plays out. All right, Dr. Lee, thank you so much for your time and insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
President Lee Jae-myung attended a summit on artificial intelligence during his state visit to Singapore and called for deeper cooperation in AI. He vowed to establish a $300 million global fund in the country by 2030, focusing on AI and deep tech startups. Here's our Blue House correspondent Song Yu-jin with the details.
Better together. That was President Lee Jae-myung's message at the Korea-Singapore AI Connect Summit in Singapore on Monday.
인공지능은 산업 구조와 일자리 그리고 우리의 일상까지 바꾸는 핵심 동력이자 국가 경쟁력을 좌우하는 전략 자산이 됐습니다. 세계적 수준의 인공지능 역량을 갖춘 한국과 싱가포르가 손을 맞잡는 것은 필연적이고 또 매우 반가운 일입니다.
Noting that both countries have overcome their limited land and natural resources through human capital and technological innovation, Lee said it is time to channel that strength into AI. To that end, President Lee unveiled 3 key initiatives. First, South Korea will establish a $300 million global fund in Singapore by 2030. This will be Seoul's first offshore global master fund focused on investing in promising AI and deep tech startups from both countries. Second is the Korea-Singapore AI Alliance, a strategic framework bringing together policymakers, industry leaders, and the scientific community.
기업과 대학, 스타트업이 서로의 지식과 자원을 공유하며 협력하는 개방형 혁신 생태계의 시발점입니다. 창의적인 아이디어가 현실로 구현되고 청년들이 지속적인 도전과 성장을 이어갈 수 있는 굳건한 기반이 될 것으로 믿습니다.
Third, the two sides agreed to expand joint AI research to help tackle global challenges. With such efforts, President Lee says South Korea and Singapore will be able to shape the AI industry, a field currently dominated by the US and China.
제조 분야라든지 또는 실용적 영역에서는 우리가 얼마든지 세계 1위를 해낼 수도 있겠다. 사람을 중심으로 한 연구와 개발 그리고 새로운 응용 영역의 개발은 아마도 양자가 협력해서 얼마든지 새로운 영역을 만들어낼 수 있겠다.
Following the event, President Lee also visited demo booths of Korean AI firms doing business in Singapore. He and First Lady Kim Hae-kyung later attended a state dinner hosted by the Singaporean president and his spouse. Song Yu-jin, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, President Lee Jae-myung has nominated ruling Democratic Party lawmaker Park Hong-keun to head the Ministry of Planning and Budget. The Blue House said on Monday that Park was selected for his expertise in fiscal policy. The four-time lawmaker currently serves on the National Assembly's Finance and Economic Planning Committee and previously chaired the Parliamentary Special Committee on Budget and Accounts. The ministerial post has been vacant since President Lee withdrew his earlier nominee Lee Hae-hoon, following allegations related to real estate fraud and workplace bullying. Also on Monday, the president nominated Hwang Jong-woo, a veteran official at the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, to serve as its next minister. Minister nominees must undergo confirmation hearings at the parliament, though their appointments will be decided by the president.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. In the Middle East, friendly fire by Kuwait has shot down 3 U.S. fighter jets. Kuwaiti Defense Forces on Monday accidentally targeted the U.S. jets while providing support for combat operations against Iran. All 6 crew members successfully ejected from the aircraft and are in a stable condition. The incident occurred as Iranian missiles and drones filled the skies over Kuwait. An investigation into the incident is now underway. In the U.S., Austin police have identified 2 college students killed in a bar shooting that wounded 14 others early on Sunday in downtown Austin, Texas. Austin police on Monday named the victims as 19-year-old Ryder Harrington and 21-year-old Savitha Shan. 3 other victims remain in critical condition. They were shot dead by a gunman who opened fire from an SUV before continuing the assault on foot with a rifle. Police officers shot dead the gunman Indiaga Dian at the scene. Dian was wearing a sweatshirt with the words "Property of Allah" written on it, and the FBI and Austin police said they are investigating the shooting as a potential act of terrorism. Officials said Dian legally purchased the guns in San Antonio in 2017 and have not previously been on the FBI's radar. Wall Street staged a resilient recovery on Monday as investors shrugged after U.S. and Israeli airstrikes on Iran rattled global markets. While the Dow Jones dropped 0.15%, the tech-heavy Nasdaq gained 0.36% as buyers rushed towards AI giants like Nvidia. The S&P 500 also ended the day with little change, edging up 0.04%. Despite the geopolitical turmoil, analysts suggest investors are treating the conflict as a temporary disruption rather than a long-term economic shift. Defense and energy sectors saw significant gains, while travel stocks plummeted under the weight of rising fuel costs. Airports across the Middle East canceled thousands of flights as joint U.S. and Israeli war on Iran disrupted regional airspace for a 3rd day. Flight trackers have said more than 4,000 flights a day were canceled across the Middle East, leaving hundreds of thousands of passengers stranded. On Monday, more than 70% of flights to the UAE and the Qatar remained grounded as regional governments enforced strict airspace closures. Dubai airports announced a limited resumption of flights late on Monday. Industry officials warned the disruption will worsen and carry significant consequences if the conflict continues.
Today marks the first workday of March and the start of the new semester. Overnight rain and snow have tapered off, but it was a cold and cloudy start for the capital region. However, the greatest concern is heavy snow in the mountainous regions of Gangwon-do province, with up to 20 centimeters of more snowfall expected through tonight there. Meanwhile, the east coast will see rainfall, and Gyeongsang-do provinces and Jeju Island could see 5 to 10 millimeters of rainfall. And this afternoon, Seoul and Daegu will both getting up to 12 degrees Celsius. And tonight, for those observing the Daeboreum full moon, a total lunar eclipse will occur. The western regions will begin to clear toward the evening, allowing a view of the eclipse except along the east coast. And this week, afternoons stay warmer than norms, but another round of rain and snow this Friday will bring a brief cold snap to the country this weekend.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.